On December 24, 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States delivered a rare moment of absolute unity. In a year marked by deep political divisions and public uncertainty, the justices came together in a way that few had anticipated. Their decision, handed down on Christmas Eve, would soon ripple across the nation and the world, signaling a turning point in the ongoing debate over federal and state power. In a stunning 9-0 ruling, the justices blocked the federal government from deploying the National Guard into American cities without state governors' consent. The unanimity of the decision was striking, especially given the contentious nature of the case and the high stakes involved. Legal experts and commentators quickly noted that such a clear consensus among the justices is exceedingly rare, especially on issues that cut to the core of American governance. This wasn't just a legal technicality, it was a powerful statement about the balance of power at the heart of American democracy. The court's opinion emphasized the foundational principle that the federal government cannot override the autonomy of the states without clear constitutional authority. By drawing a firm line, the justices reinforced the delicate system of checks and balances that has defined the United States since its founding. The decision, arriving quietly on Christmas Eve, immediately became the nation's central conversation. Across living rooms and newsrooms, Americans debated what the ruling meant for the future of federal power and state sovereignty. The timing, on a night usually reserved for family and reflection, only heightened the sense of gravity and surprise. For months, tensions had escalated between the federal administration and state governments over who controls the National Guard on domestic soil. Protests, political standoffs, and heated debates had become commonplace, with both sides claiming constitutional authority. The Supreme Court's intervention brought a sudden, decisive end to the uncertainty, but also raised new questions about the future of federal-state relations. The ruling forced a national reckoning with the limits of presidential authority and the rights of the states. Governors across the country expressed relief, while the White House issued a measured response, acknowledging the court's authority. The decision underscored the importance of dialogue and cooperation between different levels of government, especially in times of crisis. International observers watched closely, recognizing the global significance of a unanimous stand for checks and balances. Around the world, leaders and citizens alike saw the decision as a reaffirmation of the American commitment to the rule of law and constitutional order. The case became a reference point in discussions about democracy and the separation of powers in other nations. The court's decision reaffirmed that American institutions are designed to withstand immense pressure. Even in moments of national crisis, the system of government endures, adapting and responding to new challenges while holding fast to its core principles. The ruling became a symbol of resilience and the enduring strength of the Constitution. It sent a clear message: the rule of law prevails over the will of any single executive. In the end, the Supreme Court's unanimous stand was not just about one case, but about the enduring promise of American democracy. That no one, not even the president, is above the law, and that the balance of power remains the nation's greatest safeguard. The roots of this case lay in the polarized aftermath of the 2024 presidential election. Deep ideological divides and rapid policy changes fueled instability and a growing rift between federal and state leaders. Tensions peaked when the administration announced plans to deploy the National Guard to cities like Chicago, even over governors' objections. Illinois' governor fiercely opposed the move, calling it an unconstitutional overreach. This wasn't an isolated incident. States across the country challenged federal actions, fearing the erosion of federalism. The administration cited the Insurrection Act, but opponents argued it was meant for true rebellion, not local unrest. The stage was set for a monumental legal battle over the very definition of state and federal authority. In a dramatic escalation, Illinois, joined by a coalition of other states, filed an emergency lawsuit in federal court. The move was swift and decisive, reflecting the urgency and gravity of the moment. State attorneys general worked late into the night, drafting legal arguments and gathering evidence to support their case. The lawsuit sought to halt the federal government's controversial plan to deploy the National Guard within state borders. The states argued that the deployment of the National Guard, without their consent, was an overreach of federal authority and a direct threat to state sovereignty. Images of National Guard troops assembling near government buildings fueled public debate and heightened tensions across the country. Their central argument was rooted in the Constitution. Governors, they insisted, have command of their state's National Guard, unless Congress has formally federalized the force for national defense. The states maintained that the federal government could not use the Guard for domestic law enforcement against a state's will. Protests erupted outside government buildings, with citizens and officials alike voicing concerns about the precedent such a deployment could set. Law enforcement and National Guard vehicles became a common sight on city streets, underscoring the seriousness of the standoff. In a closely watched hearing, the district court sided with Illinois, issuing a temporary injunction to block the deployment. The judge's decision was seen as a major victory for state rights advocates, but it was clear the legal battle was far from over. The federal government immediately appealed the ruling, arguing that the president's authority in times of crisis must be broad and flexible. However, the appeals court upheld the block, reinforcing the lower court's decision and keeping the National Guard deployment on hold. With conflicting rulings and the stakes rising nationwide, the case quickly made its way to the Supreme Court. The nation's highest court recognized the profound implications of the dispute and intervened to resolve the constitutional crisis. Instead of issuing a quick decision through the so-called shadow docket, the Supreme Court scheduled full oral arguments. This rare move signaled the gravity and complexity of the issue, drawing intense media attention and public scrutiny. During the hearings, the Solicitor General passionately argued that the president must have broad authority to act decisively in times of national emergency, including the power to deploy the National Guard when necessary to maintain order. Illinois and its allies countered that unchecked presidential power would undermine the delicate balance of federalism, eroding the rights of states to govern their own affairs and protect their citizens from federal overreach. The justices pressed both sides with tough questions, delving into the history of the National Guard, the statutes that govern its use, and the intent of the framers of the Constitution. They sought to understand the limits of executive power and the safeguards against its abuse. As arguments concluded, it became clear that the court was deeply concerned about the potential for unchecked executive authority and the long-term consequences for American democracy. Across the country, Americans anxiously awaited the court's decision, aware that the outcome would shape the future relationship between federal and state governments for generations to come. The Supreme Court's ruling would not only determine the fate of the National Guard deployment, but also define the limits of presidential reach in times of domestic crisis, setting a precedent for years ahead. On December 24th, the Supreme Court delivered its thunderous 9-0 decision, a moment that instantly reverberated across the nation. The ruling was not just a legal milestone, but a defining event in the ongoing debate over the balance of power between the federal government and the states. Chief Justice Roberts' opinion was clear and unequivocal. States retain primary control over their National Guard for domestic law enforcement, unless Congress explicitly intervenes. This principle, he wrote, is rooted in the Constitution's careful division of authority, designed to prevent the concentration of power in any one branch or office. The court found the administration's reading of the Insurrection Act far too broad, warning that such an interpretation could undermine the very foundation of federalism. The justices stressed that the law was never intended to give the president unchecked authority to deploy military force within the states. The justices emphasized that the National Guard's unique dual role, as both state and federal force, does not grant the president a blank check to override the will of governors. Instead, the court reaffirmed that cooperation and clear legal standards must guide any federal intervention. The ruling's unanimity sent a powerful message. State sovereignty is a constitutional necessity, not a partisan issue. The justices, representing a wide spectrum of judicial philosophies, stood together to defend the principle that states are not mere administrative units of the federal government. Governors across the country, regardless of party or ideology, welcomed the decision as a victory for local control and democratic accountability. Many saw it as a reaffirmation of their ability to respond to crises in ways that reflect the unique needs of their communities. The crisis in Chicago was resolved, but the precedent set by the court will echo far beyond this moment. Future presidents, regardless of their intentions, will now face clear constitutional limits when considering the use of military force on American soil. The decision ensures that military force within the United States remains a last resort, subject to strict legal checks and public scrutiny. It is a safeguard against the dangers of executive overreach, and a reminder that the rule of law must always prevail. The court's unity left no room for ambiguity or political spin. In a time of deep national division, the justices spoke with one voice, drawing a clear line in the sand to protect the delicate balance of American democracy. The political fallout was immediate and profound. The administration suffered a major defeat, weakening its hand in negotiations with Congress and the states. Governors and legislatures saw the ruling as a powerful reassertion of their sovereignty. State-level politics surged, with both parties emboldened to resist federal overreach. Congress was forced to confront the Insurrection Act, sparking new debates over presidential emergency powers. Lawmakers now face tough questions about national security and civil liberties. The ruling reset federal-state relations, pushing both sides toward negotiation and cooperation. The era of unilateral federal action gave way to a renewed model of partnership. The legal standoff sent shockwaves through the economy, chilling investment and consumer confidence in targeted cities. Businesses hesitated, fearing instability and military patrols on city streets. The Supreme Court's decision brought relief, restoring predictability and stability for commerce. The ruling underscored states' responsibility for local law enforcement, prompting calls for increased federal funding. Defense and security industries shifted focus to state and local customers, adapting to a decentralized market. The decision complicated business for large contractors, but opened opportunities for specialized firms. Ultimately, the court's clarity reinforced the economic importance of stable, local governance. For ordinary Americans, the Supreme Court's decision was deeply personal. In targeted cities, anxiety over federal troops gave way to relief and a renewed sense of local empowerment. Community leaders and activists celebrated the ruling as a victory for trust and collaboration in public safety. Not everyone agreed. Some in high-crime areas had hoped for federal intervention. The decision didn't solve underlying social problems, but clarified who is responsible for addressing them. The case sparked a national conversation about law enforcement, federalism, and civic engagement. Americans were reminded that the structure of government has real, everyday consequences. Legal experts agree. The most striking feature of the ruling was its unanimity. A 9-0 decision on such a contentious issue signals a principle so fundamental, it transcends politics. The court drew a clear line. Domestic military force against a state's will is a bridge too far. The ruling reaffirmed federalism, making clear that governors are chief executives, not branch managers for the president. Law schools will teach this case as a defining moment in the balance of power. The decision showed the judiciary's independence and the enduring strength of the rule of law. Even the most powerful office is subject to constitutional limits. As 2026 begins, the Supreme Court's decision closes one chapter and opens another. The crisis is over, but debates about power and governance continue. Congress must now decide whether to rewrite the rules for domestic troop deployment. Citizens have a crucial role, engaging with lawmakers and shaping the future of federal and state authority. Governors and mayors, now secure in their power, face new pressure to deliver on public safety. The ruling is a call to action for civic engagement at every level. The court's bold move reaffirmed democracy's foundations and checked executive power. The future of the republic rests not just with the justices, but with all its citizens.